Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we're talking tactics for Star Wars Armada, and the focus is how to use a bunch of small ships to take down a much bigger ship. This was posed in the question from a patron, and I always like to answer Patreon questions. Sometimes they turn into videos as well, and so this one I thought I could expand upon it and apply it to larger ships than just a single Star Destroyer, but rather any really heavily large ship, especially for things like Starhawks as well, which are even nastier, or a Super Star Destroyer. How do you take down a really big ship with a bunch of small ships and not just have them all die instantly? And so I want to talk about some different strategies that are going to go along with this. If you guys haven't already, make sure you enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway we're running right now. You have a couple of days left for that. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. If you like Star Wars Armada or other Star Wars and tabletop games, you're in the right place. Be sure to stick around. Check out my other videos as well, and you can jump in our Discord and keep the discussion going. There we go. Links for all that stuff down here in the video description. So, if you have a bunch of small ships and you're trying to take out a much larger ship, a very tanky ship, a ship that might seem like it's going to be nearly impossible to bring down, I think there's a couple of key things that you should keep in mind. And the first tip I'm going to give is to maximize your dice colors. Let's say I've got a couple of Rebel ships, CR90s, for example. I want to look at the dice that not only that I have, but what my opponent has. And I need to really think about what ranges that I want to be at to maximize the amount of dice that I can shoot while not putting myself at too close a range. A lot of small ships tend to have evade tokens, which work very, very well if you are at long range from your attacker. I like to try to keep my ships at long range from any really large ship. An Imperial Star Destroyer or a Starhawk is going to be able to fire on you with much fewer dice if I'm at long range. Medium range is sometimes okay, but usually you get your biggest payload from small ships attacking large ships if you're staying at long range. And again, if you don't have any black dice in your attack pool, you have no business getting into close range ever. So there's no reason for you to do that unless you have no other choice. Now, if you're running small ships like an MC-30 with black dice, then sure, then by all means. If you're running a Gladiator, then sure, a Demolisher, things like that. There are some examples where small ships will want to get into close range. Maybe an Imperial Raider with a boarding party, something like that. Possibly, although it's a huge risk to do it. But for the most part, I would suggest generally staying at long range as often as you can. Some ships are really, really great for this, like the Nebulons, for example, have all red dice in the front arc. If you can have a really slow approach, try to keep yourself at a range that's going to maximize your dice and allow you to continue to do damage while minimizing your vulnerability. Again, evade tokens are much better than they used to be years ago. And against a Star Destroyer, the CR90 has a lot more survivability than it used to. That you can potentially burn an evade token to cancel 2 dice at long range. It's definitely going to help you stay alive. And every round you stay alive is another round that you can continue to shoot. And that's one important thing, is you need to shoot as often as possible, which kind of leads me to my next point. Attack together. Don't send ships in one at a time. Don't send a CR90 by itself to engage an Imperial Star Destroyer or an enemy Starhawk or any really big nasty, or Providence or anything like that. Don't send them in one at a time. They're not going to do very much if you have just one ship attacking. Have everybody attack together. In this example, of course, it shows a victory Star Destroyer, but the point stands. You want more than just 2 ships. As a matter of fact, you want as many ships as you can firing on the target at the same time. You're going to determine at the very beginning of the game what is that big ship that you really want to kill. And I mean, you don't always necessarily have to kill it. Sometimes if you're a second player, you've got a good objective. Sometimes you don't really need to even kill that big ship. But in the case that you do, and that's why we're having this video, you want as many ships as you can flying to maximize their range and to not get too close to that enemy ship so that you can have as much dice as possible throwing against an enemy ship every single round. And by having your forces attack together, that's an important thing. Some people will split up their ships, and one of the pitfalls of fleet symmetry, fleet coherency, is having like 1 or 2 ships that kind of start off in like a corner of the map, and then it takes them 3 or 4 turns to kind of rejoin the fleet. All of those are turns that they could have been firing alongside all the rest of your ships. Or if you've got some ships in the back that are outside of firing range, it does you very, very little good. The only exception to this is if you have a a very small ship that has your commander on it, I can sometimes understand why you want to keep them a little bit safe, but still you want them to be able to throw dice when they can. So while you want to maybe keep them in the back, don't do it for too long. Still be willing to throw some dice with your flagship, even if it's a small ship flagship. Again, as many ships, if you can have 4 or 5 ships all throwing dice on a Star Destroyer, even if that Star Destroyer takes out 1 or even 2 ships each turn, of course, that if they've got gunnery teams, you may lose a ship every round. And if you're attacking with only 1 ship each round, of course, that's going to be really disastrous. But if you're attacking with 5 ships and then you lose 1, we still got 4 more ships that are all throwing dice. So it doesn't seem as bad if you're bringing everybody and all of your guns to bear on the ship at the same time. It's always a nice thing to do that as often as you can. The next thing I want to do is maximize the number of rounds that you are able to shoot. And this is a really important thing, as it really hits home with tanky Star Destroyers and Starhawks. Most importantly, Starhawks, especially with Agate and a lot of the ways that Starhawks are nearly indestructible. And one of the reasons that they're nearly indestructible is because the game of Star Wars Armada is only a 6-round game. And, usually dice aren't thrown on the first round. Your opponent may know that you can't kill their ship if you don't engage quickly enough. If you deploy at speed 1, for example, and your opponent deploys at speed 1, or in some cases an opponent will deploy at speed 0 if they have a very, very tanky ship, they can afford to slow roll you so that you can't even engage them until round 4, and then it's mathematically impossible for you to kill the ship even if you rolled all doubles for every single attack for the rest of the game. At a certain point, you just don't have time to kill them. So if you can identify an enemy large tanky ship that you've got to destroy, you want to deploy yourself in both a position and with a relative speed, and of course maybe with nav dials planned for the first turn or 2 to be able to make sure that you can get in firing range and stay in firing range for as long as possible. This doesn't mean you can't also throw some good, well-placed concentrate fire commands in there. They're often good on small ships. I love CR90s. Once they get to the right sweet spot, toss in a concentrate fire in there when the timing's right. Again, if they're a command 1 ship, you can totally do that. But nav is going to be really important for at least for that first turn, if not several turns thereafter, to help keep you alive and keep you shooting. My next thing, speaking of staying alive and staying shooting, is to arc dodge when you can. Most really big bad ships have a certain arc that you want to avoid. And in the case of an Imperial Star Destroyer, it's definitely going to be that front arc. It is a nasty, nasty arc. You don't want to be in the front arc, especially if you do have to get close. If you are a small ship that has black dice, if you're if you're an MC-30 or a Raider or a Gladiator Demolisher or something like that, if at all possible, you want to get out of that front arc. Now this can be very, very tricky. It helps if you have high activations and you want to make sure that that ship can go last, so this way they can have maybe a little bit of better flexibility on where they move, and a little more knowledge of the board state and where that enemy ship is going to be. If you're able to get into the rear arc of just about any heavily tanky ship, it's going to give you a tremendous survivability option, and also don't be afraid to ram if you do get that close and you get it very, very low, especially in the last couple of turns. I'm not suggesting ramming as a primary strategy, but it is definitely a viable strategy if you're not a flotilla. Don't do it if you're a flotilla. Although there are a few corner cases where it's still a good idea if it's going to maybe help prevent a ship from escaping your little death web. But again, positioning is very important, and also position where the shields are not. If somebody has like full shields in the front and you happen to be in the back, then that's great because they're not going to be able to redirect to those under most circumstances. So again, arc dodging is great. It keeps you alive. It keeps you fighting longer, and you're starting to see a common theme of this. Every round that you can have as many ships as possible, throwing as much of their dice as possible while maximizing their own survivability is definitely going to help bring down a Star Destroyer or other really large ship. The last piece of advice I have is to remember your upgrades. Again, if you're a newer player or you're an experienced player, but you're trying out a different strategy that maybe you're a little unfamiliar with, or if you have a very big fleet, if you have a lot of ships and you have them all built differently, it's very easy to lose track of certain upgrades. I have been playing this game since it first came out, and I still, to this day, forget my upgrades. Happens to me all the time. Anytime I'm trying something slightly different, which is almost every time I play. Anytime I'm trying a new commander that I hardly ever use. I've had whole games go by where I'm like, I didn't even use my commander's ability once this whole game. It's happened to me multiple times. It probably will happen to me again. Don't wait until the game is over and then look down and realize, oh man, I could have been using XI7s. I could have been using my Turbo Laser Reroute Circuits. By the way, Turbo Laser Reroute Circuits is a great option. It's one of the reasons I included it in here. It's a great option to put on a CR90 or lots of other ships that just it gives you average of like 3 for just about any attack. Even if you only have a side arc and you toss the concentrate fire out there, which is, again, a great option. Don't forget about those upgrades. You're probably going to roll at least 1 hit, and you turn the other die to a double. It makes it you typically at least 3. And against a Star Destroyer, even if they brace, it just still brings it down to 2. And if you've got 5 or more of these ships all doing that, boom, 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 that's 10 damage in a round. That's more than 10 because they're not going to brace every single one of those. They're going to redirect, they're going to burn through shields, and in a single round of shooting, you're going to probably have almost all of their shields down and a couple of damage on that hull. You can really do a lot of damage if you get everything lined up and have everything shooting and remember all of your upgrades and keep your fleet alive as long as possible. And hopefully, some of these tips will be helpful to you next time you're trying to bring down a big, nasty Star Destroyer or other huge, tanky ship like a Starhawk or a Super Star Destroyer or maybe a tanky interdictor or something really nasty and threatening. Hopefully, this helps. Let me know what you guys think, or if you have any extra tips that you want to leave down in the comments for the rest of our viewers. I'd love to keep the discussion going. You can also join our Discord. I talked about that. Social media links, all that stuff is down there. If you're interested in joining the channel's support on Patreon, we would love to have you. There's links for that in the video description as well. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. Thank you so much for your continued support. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all. The spice must flow. And always wash your socks.